Good morning or good afternoon if you're in a different time zone across the ocean, and welcome to our 10th Streaming Media Connect virtual event. We'll be back in Boston in person for Streaming Media East in May, and that program will be going online soon, but these Connect events give us a chance to stay on top of the latest developments, trends, challenges, and opportunities in the streaming media space and dig into those issues in between those in-person events. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the conference chair for streaming media events, and I'm also the CMO of Ideas. We have a full day of sessions today, tomorrow, and Thursday, and then workshops on Friday. So I hope we'll see some of you every session for the rest of the week, or at least for a few more after this one. Before we jump in, just a few housekeeping notes. Remember that music you heard Steve Nathans-Kelly, our producer, playing over the intro? The first person who can identify it in the chat wins an Amazon gift card, and we'll announce the winner at the end of each session. Now, you must be present to win, and you can only win once this week. So if you win early on, let everyone else have some fun and don't answer in the chat later on. After that, we do have spy cams in each of your rooms, so we will know if you are using Shazam. But no, actually we don't. I probably need to explicitly say that we don't. But just a way to add a little fun to the proceedings this week. We'll announce that Amazon gift card winner at the end of the session. If you have questions for our panelists, please enter them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen rather than in the chat. The panelists will answer them as they come in or at the end of the hour, depending on the moderator's preferences. But put them in the Q&A, please. It just makes it easier for the moderator and I to keep track of them if they are there. Last housekeeping note, you'll see, or you may see, that subtitles are turned on. And if you're seeing them on your screen and you don't want to see them, you can go to live transcript at the bottom of the screen, or show captions, I think it says. Go to show captions at the bottom of the screen and select disable transcript. Finally, all of these Streaming Media Connect sessions will be available on demand starting next Monday. Just go to streamingmedia.com, click on video, and then click conference videos. I would like to thank our diamond sponsor for all of our sessions, Signient, and we have a brief video message from Signient right now.
Any IP network at speeds that can be up to 100 times faster than traditional transfer methods. More than 50,000 businesses use the Signient platform to send and share files, automate movement of data between systems, exchange content with global partners, and move content to and from the cloud. The Signient platform gives you the power to operate at the speed you need to run your business.
I'd also like to thank the sponsor for this session, Bitmovin. And Bitmovin's Igor Oreper will be joining this panel as he and our other guests talk about the latest developments in streaming media codecs. And so with that, I'll pass the mic over to our moderator, Jan Ozer. Jan, how you doing?
Hey, Eric, good. How about you?
Doing all right. I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. Hope you remembered, because I didn't. I'm already in trouble. And we're here to talk about codecs today. Obviously, something that I feel very strongly about, something I'm very interested in. And we've got a great panel of experts to talk about where all the major codecs, which are H.264, H.265, VP9, and AV1, should fit into your strategy, in 2023 and 2024, as well as newer entrants like EVC, VVC, and LCEVC, where they should fit into your strategy either this year or going forward. So our panelists today, in politically correct alphabetical order, Andrey Norkin joins us again. He's a senior research scientist for video algorithms at Netflix and co-chair of the Video Codec Working Alliance for Open Media, or Video Codec Working Group at the Alliance for Open Media. And before that, Andrey spent 7 years in research at Ericsson. So I can tell you a little bit about the panelists, because it's not just their current title. They've all got wonderful industry experience before they got to their current positions. Igor Oreper, who's from Bitmovin, he's the chief architect, and he spent some time in Comcast as executive director of product management. He also spent some time working at a chocolate manufacturer, which he and I'll get into at in a more private location sometime soon. Sounds like interesting work. Kevin Yao from Amazon, he's Principal Partner Solution Architect at Amazon Media, and he was also a former Principal Engineer at Dish Networks. And then last but not least is Alex Zambelli, who's with Warner Brothers Discovery. He's a Technical Product Manager. He's got experience at Hulu, iStream Planet, and we met him when he was a Senior Technology Evangelist back at Microsoft. So jumping right in, we're going to have each panelist spend a little bit of time telling you who they are, what they do, and then talking about the type of content that they're distributing, the type of endpoints they support, and the codecs that they're currently supporting. So let's get all the cameras on for all the speakers at this point, and the microphones. And let's start with you, Andrey. Could you discuss the live and video on-demand content you're distributing and the endpoints that you currently support and which formats you send to each?
Definitely. First, hi, Ian. We support a number of different formats, and we typically use codecs that fit these formats in the best way. So, for example, one of the latest additions to our codecs family was EV1, and we currently use it on smart TVs, on some game consoles, Android phones, and even in browsers. So that's basically the codec that brings the best compression efficiency so far in our catalog. If you want to stream HDR, for example, either Dolby Vision or HDR10, then that's probably going to be HVC. Like 4K video, and you don't have AV1, it probably is going to be the same. VP9 is still in use, so that's basically computers, maybe some browsers and mobile, such as some Android devices, and it brings compression efficiency that is better than H.264. It still has good compatibility with other devices, with many devices, and I guess finally, if none of that worked, our fallback would be H.264. Of course, that's the most ubiquitous codec nowadays, so it's supported in very many devices. So if none of that works, then H.264 probably will. So I guess those are the main codecs that we are currently using.
Okay, Alex, how about you at Warner Brothers?
Hi, thanks, Jen. Yeah, so at Warner Brothers Discovery, we actually run a number of streaming services that really kind of span, a lot of different use cases. So we have HBO Max SVOD service. We have Discovery Plus SVOD service. There's a number of TV Everywhere apps that we own as well, which mostly feature live linear streams. And then speaking of live, Discovery Plus and Eurosport also feature both live linear and live events. And HBO Max actually recently started streaming live events as well. So US soccer games, and then starting in the fall, it'll also be carrying some of the NHL games as well. So the baseline codec for all of these services on the video side is H.264. And on the audio side, AAC. In addition to those codecs, we also use HEVC for mostly 4K and or HDR delivery. And then on the audio side, a lot of the 5.1, well, all of the 5.1 and Dolby Atmos streams are delivered using Dolby Digital Plus. So when it comes to HEVC, for example, I mentioned that we use that for both 4K and HDR delivery. So that's HEVC, for example, on HBO Max is enabled for both delivery to mobile devices, browsers, a lot of the living room devices, so smart TVs, streaming sticks, and game consoles as well. Whereas on the Discovery side, so far it's only been enabled for some of the streaming boxes and for smart TVs.
Okay. Can you, just out of curiosity, can you share the top rate that you're using for 4K with HDR? Can you tell us what the top bit rate is?
It's I believe for HBO Max is it's somewhere between 16 and 20 megabits per second.
Okay. All right, cool. Igor, switching over to the service provider side, what formats does Bitmovin support, and what do you perceive as the common usage practices by your customers?
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about it in the context of the video developer report from Bitmovin. So this is the 6th year that we published the report, and really it's a survey of I think we had over 400 respondents this time, and we ask a number of questions about what technologies are in use today, what are you planning to use in the future. So I'll talk about those codecs and also talk about what Bitmovin supports. What we see, and these are a little different between video on demand and live use cases. I'll focus on video on demand here. We still see AVC at the top. So 85% of respondents are still using AVC. That number for sort of new adoption is quite low. It's only 30% for new adoption of AVC in the next 12 to 24 months. HEVC is second on that list with 42% of respondents using HEVC and 48% planning to implement HEVC over the next couple of years. VVC is next up. This is actually fairly surprising for us. 15% are saying they've already deployed VVC in production use cases, and that number is 29% for the next couple of years. And then you have AV1, VP8, EVC, VP9, and LCDC at the very end. And so Bitmovin encoder supports, and what we see in our most common use cases, of course, are still AVC, HEVC, VP8, VP9, and AV1. So that's kind of the order where we see usage in production by our customer base today. I would say the biggest growth that we're expecting to see is in HEVC and AV1. HEVC in particular because Chrome started supporting HEVC right at, I guess it was September, October of 2022, and we're seeing a lot of uptake there.
Okay, and just to be clear, I mean, the survey that you discussed is available on your website. It's a great survey. I get it every year and refer to it during the year, and it includes codecs that you're not currently supporting, like VVC, correct, LCEVC, and EVC. I guess the point I would make and maybe ask you about is that it's not just publishers, it's also infrastructure providers. So there's a lot of people talking about adopting EVC, for example, and maybe they want to support it in their player or they want to support it in their encoding platform, but that doesn't mean they're actually going to deploy it as a publisher. Because I guess, I don't know what the percentage of people viewing this are publishers, but it shocks me that 10% of the people think they're going to distribute an EVC next year, which is what the survey reported.
Yeah, I agree with that, and yeah, we don't break it down between publishers and tech providers, but yeah, you're correct in that, Jan.
Okay, Kevin, I know AWS has come a long way with the format support. It used to be only H.264 and HEVC, and now it's greatly expanded. So tell us what AWS is doing from a format perspective, both live and VOD.
Yeah, so I more coming from the AWS partners work, and in the partners work, we have more than 400 AWS partners against 5 solution areas to help customers transform the media entertainment industry. The 5 solution areas are content production, media supply chain and archive, broadcast, direct to consumer and streaming, and data science and analytics. So within the partners, I can see they break, I could just generally break them down to hardware and software. So with regards to hardware, just like Andrey and Alex and Igor mentioned, mainly H.264 AVC due to the hardware chipset and device and legacy tight-ends. But with OTT and direct-to-consumer, where they're more software driven, that's where various codecs that Igor mentioned that we definitely see within due to the nature of their faster innovation and shorter adoption cycles.
Okay, thank you. Alex, what's the general approach that you take when you decide to deploy a new codec? Because I imagine you get pummeled by, hey, VVC it's here, it's today, and different interest groups pushing different codecs. How do you sit down and decide which codecs to use, and how does that typically work?
Yeah, so I would say, like, the first step of evaluating any codec is evaluating the quality and the bitrate savings that it provides. And so first step is just technical evaluation, really, to make sure that if we do adopt a new codec, that we will benefit somehow from it, whether that's raising the quality at existing connection speeds or saving bitrate and delivering existing levels of quality. But either way, right, first we need to make sure that that is a codec that's worth being adopted. I would say that, like, the key requirement really for then going and deploying a new codec is the device adoption rate. So because there's additional cost associated with encoding with a new codec and storing new content copies, some of that cost needs to be at least somewhat offset by any savings that we might get from CDN delivery cost. And we also want to make sure that if we're going to go through the trouble of encoding content all over again, spending money on that there's enough customers out there that are going to benefit from it. And so waiting for a significant amount of devices out there to support decoding with a new codec is really key. But I think what's interesting when it comes to device adoption and support for new codec decoders is that there is a big difference between SVOD services and services that mostly rely on user-generated content, in that SVOD services have to deliver all their content with DRM protection. And so what that means in practical terms is that until there is a secure decoder on the device, which typically means a hardware decoder, we can't really take advantage of it. We could, at most, use a software decoder to deliver unprotected content such as trailers or any short form like promos, ads, things like that. But when it comes to the feature content, we really can't do that without DRM. So we have to wait until there are enough hardware decoders out there. And so that also means for most SVOD services that those decoders have to be implemented on the streaming devices such as Fire TV, Roku, smart TVs like Samsung TV, LG TV, and so on. And so that's really like the kind of the key use case that we need to be able to support.
Is there a magic number? I mean, what opens your eyes? Is it 5%, 20%?
I would say it would need to be about probably 30%. I would say a minimum in terms of device adoption. So kind of looking across the whole device ecosystem of this streaming service, usually once we have over 30% of devices supporting a particular codec, then I feel like it's worthwhile.
Okay. Andrey, can you take us through the same analysis that you do at Netflix to decide whether or not to start implementing a new codec?
All right. So, well, first of all, this codec should be a standard one. So because we have a multitude of different devices, so we would like the codec to be implemented, and that's typically a standard codec with a specification. So, and also of course, we are looking at the support, especially the hardware decoders. So it should be either sufficient number of decoders, hardware decoders, or we should anticipate an increase in the decoders number. Of course, an important thing is if the codec basically enables us a new format. For example, like when HEVC was finalized, that was an easy decision to adopt it because that enabled you 4K, and that was an important argument to use something. Like maybe it can enable, let's say, a segment of devices that would otherwise wouldn't be served some particular format, and that would also be taken into consideration. And of course, you look at the bandwidth reduction. If nothing else, that's also important. And you should also look into that in combination with the CDN delivery, because typically if we add a new codec, it doesn't mean that we are saving a lot in the sense of the CDN, because we are adding something. So we actually may need to take more cache on the in the CDN. So which means we have to weigh this against how much gain we get by having a more efficient standard, which means that there should be some gap between the previous generation codec and the current generation, and basically based on that we will take a decision whether to adopt a new codec. Let's say if it's a marginal improvement in performance, then it doesn't mean that we overall there is gain actually. So and maybe also clarity of the licensing terms is also important when thinking about new formats.
Okay, thank you. So Kevin, as a service provider or representing multiple service providers, how do you sense that the companies you work with choose which formats to support? And how far ahead of the mass market do they need to be? Because it feels like the publishers are kind of lagging indicators. They wait until, as Alex said, a 30% adoption rate. But as a service provider, do you need to be in front of that?
I guess I was muted. So yeah, it really depends on the use case. For me personally, there are about 6 use cases or 6 factors that I think it needs to be looked at. So I mean, when we talk about codec, the benefits of deploying video codec is reducing bandwidth, improve compression efficiency. So bandwidth saving is a must. Secondly, the hardware and software support. The third will be standards, if this is a standard versus proprietary codec. Fourth will be licensing. It's loyalty versus royalty free. That's also important. The fifth use case will be latency. So is this low latency to support, sport betting use case where VOD where latency doesn't matter. And lastly, this one appear more and more on my radar is the green and carbon aware encoding. So as you see, video accounts over 60% downstream traffic on the internet. There are a lot of energy resource being used for encoding and decoding these contents. In addition, we need to consider how much energy is used to deliver the file across the fiber to the end users. So that's definitely another factor to look at. So instead of traditional sense where we're just focusing on squeezing every bit out of the encoders, I think we need to consider amount of energy used to create them as well. So at some point there'll be a trade-off between quality. We always want to reduce distortion. We want to reduce the bits, but now we're looking at reduced power consumption and carbon emission as well. So,
okay, good.
Yep.
Igor, how about you? What's your and Igor, if you could, you might be able to pull this from the report if you don't remember it offhand. But what percentage of the publishers were publishing with and without DRM in your report? Do you recall that offhand?
No, I do not recall DRM.
Okay,
with and without. I'll look it up. I have the report here. While we chat, maybe I'll come back to it.
Okay. So what do you consider? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would I think everything that Andrey, Alex, and Kevin said really applies to our customers as well. And again, looking back at the report, the top initiative in the last survey was controlling cost. Right, so everyone said that is their top initiative. Well, not everyone, 33% of the respondents, but that's the highest number for the respondents. And that's storage, it's egress from origin, and it's CDN distribution. Right, so that tends to be the biggest driver right now. at least as of the middle of last year. That tends to be the biggest driver for making changes, really any technical changes to the video supply chain. But then after that, you have folks who are delivering to consumers in bandwidth constrained markets, right? So that becomes really important just to get high quality media to the consumer in those markets. Maybe they're constrained to mobile networks only in some places in Southeast Asia, in Latin America. So that tends to be a big one. And, if you can do all that without decrease or degradation in quality, that's even better, right? So that tends to be where we're seeing adoption of multi-codec, right? And also it's important, there isn't one codec that solves everyone's issues, right? But folks are moving to more efficient codecs that are possible across lots of devices to try and get the best coverage possible.
What's your sense of, I don't want you to tell me any secrets, but tell us a secret. What's your sense of when Bitmovin would start to support EVC? I mean, it rated very, very high on the wish list of the people in the survey, and it really seems like it's coming on. And looking back at AVC, you guys really started deploying that when it was way before its time. So what's up with VVC?
So, the way we think about codecs is it's another tool in the toolbox. And, as a company that's really focused on providing a really good set of tools to video developers, we're always looking at what is the next tool we can offer. It has to be a standard, right? An open standard. And, to your point on VVC, we do have a prototype implementation. I expect you'll see an announcement about our support for VVC soon. It's not generally available today, but we're definitely investing some energy in adding VVC to that tool set.
Okay, cool. So Kevin, one of the biggest occurrences in the past 12 months as related to codec adoption was Chrome's support for HEVC. How significant is that for the people that you're representing, and what can you tell us about how it supports DRM?
Yeah, so for me, as a general consensus, HEVC really start to shine on resolution 1080p and up, given its encoding efficiencies and its transformation tools it uses. So, but since most consumers already are watching high definition content on smart TVs, set-top box, we're using apps that already have the support built in. So, and since most premium content is consumed already supporting HEVC playback, the fact that Chrome support HEVC, the near-term impact is somewhat muted in my horizon, but we shall see for the longer term. I definitely see it as promising. Okay,
Andrey, what's your sense of how important that is to Netflix?
I think it's probably too early to speak about it. It has been announced pretty recently, so we still basically have to see how everything works. But in general, I would probably agree with. I agree with what Kevin said, that I mean, HEVC is already supported on many devices, and so maybe it's not that big, let's say, event for our service.
Okay, Igor, you're some tech people broke the story from Bitmovin, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So what's your? Go ahead.
It was interesting. So we reported that as a bug like 6 years ago, and
they fixed it.
It's fixed. It's amazing. So I mean, I think it's great. It certainly adds, increases the percentage of devices or clients capable or theoretically capable, right? You still need a hardware-based decoder on the device to to decode HEVC, but in theory, right, that number is like 85, 86% now of browsers which would be able to decode HEVC on compatible devices. I guess the challenge is still lack of DRM, right? So there's no support in a wideband CDM for HEVC on Chrome, unfortunately, and hopefully that changes. To Alex's point, that's a must for any premium content provider, certainly any of the SVOD streaming services. But I think it's a really positive step in the right direction. We were excited and surprised to see it, and yeah, kudos to Google for making that happen.
Okay, Alex, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best really thing to come out of that news is that I think it really improves the perception of HEVC as a widely supported codec, because I would say that like browsers were really the exception. I think HEVC adoption actually reached critical mass, I think, several years ago, because with the exception of browsers, it had already become a standard on all the smart TVs and all the streaming sticks. It was on every gaming console, and so mobile phones as well. And so, yeah, we were at a point where essentially it was really just browsers that were lagging behind. So I'm glad they did it, because I think it just is a reminder that, okay, HEVC is here. It's a reality.
How did it affect your service, though? I mean, are you sending, what percentage more video or HEVC encoded video are you sending to the browser now? Or was it like a nothing burger?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, for an SVOD service like HBO Max or Discovery Plus, actually doesn't really have an impact, because it still lacks the secure decoding, it still lacks integration with DRM, and so until that's supported in Chrome, we can't really take advantage of the HEVC decoder there. We could potentially take advantage of it for like playback of trailers, ads, like other short form content that's not typically protected. But for majority of our content, we actually still can't take advantage of it. So that's why I say, like, at least for us, like, it's really more, it's good for the perception of HEVC in terms of making sure that everyone is aware that it is now a widely supported codec. But practically, it didn't really have much of an impact.
Okay. So let's switch over to AV1. I think everybody would agree that AV1 hardware support, particularly on mobile, has taken a lot longer than was expected. How has this impacted your decision to support AV1 and roll out? And start with Andrey.
As you know, we decided to support AV1 anyway, and that was basically, we anticipated that there will be hardware support going on. So I don't know if that took longer than expected. Typically, codecs, you don't have a wide hardware support from the start. There is some period when you start getting more and more hardware decoders, and basically what we decided is to go ahead with software decoding, and the reason was because we have a chicken and egg problem, right? So basically you need hardware decoder support to let's say decide to use the standard, but also probably vendors, they would also like to see that a codec is used for streaming, and probably they also would like to be able to test their implementation against some streaming services. So a good solution was to use software decoders, and I would say that it worked pretty well, because of course we had to make sure that these decoders are efficient. So, for example, we financed some optimizations in David decoder from Videoland that we later used. And in principle, I should say that software decoders, I think they worked okay from the decoding point of view. So you can get, of course, dropped frames every now and then compared to hardware decoders, but in general, this works. I guess the biggest difference with the hardware decoders is probably on the mobile, because you can get a more battery drain, basically, if you use software decoding. But currently, I would say we see that we are going ahead with mostly hardware more and more hardware decoders are for AV1 are coming to the market. So you can see this in the mobile phones. So like new chipsets, they often support AV1, at least on the higher end. Also, like newer TVs, definitely AV1 is supported in many of them. Yeah, so I would say that currently we are seeing the hardware decoding ramping up. So
how does that affect you, Igor? Because I know you guys sell a player. Do you have an AV1 decoder in the player, or do you rely on open source players like David that we've heard about?
So actually, that's a great question. I don't have an answer for you on the playback side. That's okay, but some homework for me to do. You know, we haven't seen a huge demand for AV1 decode yet. I think everyone is waiting for more hardware compatible decode to be available. But we've seen definitely an increase in AV1 encode and adoption. We've seen about a 4x increase over the last 4 years. Of course, you know, we see some of it in the wild from Netflix, but also Facebook and YouTube. So it's, you know, we see AV1 content out there now. I think definitely the client side is still lacking. And, you know, I expect it's going to grow. It would be interesting to see the sort of take rate of AV1 encode versus HEVC and also VVC. But definitely we're seeing more of it out there in the wild. Okay.
Alex, you talked about 30%, and I guess you meant hardware support, right? You did mean hardware support because you wanted you wanted DRM. So what are you seeing with AV1? When does that really get close on your radar screen?
So I think we're actually getting pretty close to it. I will echo what Andrey mentioned earlier, that I don't think EV1 adoption is behind. I think it's actually pretty much on track with you know, previous codecs. I think it always does take about 4 to 5 years after a spec is finalized to actually see the devices come out with support. But I think the good news is that I think this could be the year where we do reach that, you know, let's say, you know, 25, 30, 40% adoption rate, because what we're seeing is that like Fire TV, for example, like latest Fire TV already supports AV1. Samsung TVs, LG TVs, they also have adopted AV1. Really, I think the key devices they're kind of missing are Roku at this point, Apple TV, iOS. And so I think once we have at least Roku or Apple TV on board as well, I think we might actually be at the point where adopting AV1 would make sense. Oh, and I should have mentioned Android. Android has already also adopted AV1 on a lot of their mobile devices. And so, yeah, so I think we are seeing adoption. We are seeing the device ecosystem grow. We just need, I think, a few more key devices, and then I think I think we're ready.
Fun fact, if I could just jump in, Alex, Roku streaming stick, the 4K streaming stick, turns out does support AV1 decode. You just need to put your content on a USB drive and get it working that way.
All right. We'll
what
do
are we
delivery by mail.
Yeah. Alex, you brought up the A word. What are, you know, it's Apple's support of AV1 is kind of like Lucy holding the football. I think everybody's been expecting it year after year, and they keep yanking the football just as we're about to kick it. What, do you know anything, or what do you hear, or what can you share?
I don't know anything, so I can't share anything either. But I mean, I will say that as far as, like, you know, SVOD services go, you know, Apple TV and iOS devices aren't as dominant on those platforms as they are, I think, for a lot of the user-generated content platforms. So if you're YouTube, for example, a really significant percentage of your traffic comes from iOS devices. But if you're HBO Max or Discovery Plus, most of the viewing is in the living room. And so that's why, Roku, Fire TV, Samsung, LG, those are kind of the most important devices in that segment. Apple TV would probably be the next one in line. But yeah, it's not as the Apple devices and their support of new codecs is not as important in terms of adoption as it is, I think, for user-generated content support.
Okay, Kevin, in your network of developers, what are you seeing as AV1 adoption?
Yeah, so my partners are global and worldwide, so it really depends what end customer wants and what their unique geolocation are. So as we all know, managing multiple codecs is very challenging for the ecosystem and costly. So most of my partners are gearing towards one or two codecs based on the requirements, and they want to reach the wide adoption as much as possible. So breaking down this to hardware and software, with AV1 hardware support, I do see AV1 hardware has been much slower than anticipated in the mobile industry. And in turns, this likely impact the overall decision to support the rollout for AV1. Software decode is for AV1 is good, and it's pretty common, and it can be very resource intensive, and it may not be suitable for all use cases, especially in the mobile, especially with degradation to battery. So that really depends as well.
Okay. What's the one of the things that's always been a little bit confusing to me is the status of HDR support among some of the newer codecs. So Igor, what can you tell us about AV1 support for HDR10 or HDR10 Plus or Dolby Vision? Where is that today and where is that going?
I would say it's in development. So for I'm just looking up our support matrix here. I think for HLG is supported for VP9, and then for AV1 we need to add HDR support. I'm curious what Netflix has done there, actually, Andrey.
Yeah, let me jump to Andrey on that. Andrey, tell us what's I know that the HDR10 Plus AV1 spec has been, I think, finalized. What can you tell us about that and what Netflix is doing with that?
So basically, I think AV1 has everything to support HDR. Basically, HDR10 is supported just in the specification, so you have all the metadata specified that you need to support HDR10. And Alliance for Open Media has recently finalized the specification that basically tells you how to use HDR10 Plus with AV1, so that also exists, and we are currently looking forward to. We are working on basically implementing HDR with AV1, but yeah, I guess we'll announce it when we're ready.
Okay, and just to be clear, I guess Netflix came out in November of 2021. On supporting a number of smart TVs, and that's all SDR at this point, correct?
Yes, currently we support SDR with AV1, but we are working on HDR as well.
Okay. Alex, you got anything to add to that, or what percentage of your content is going out with HDR these days?
It's still a small percentage of content on the HBO Max side, which is actually the only service currently that's supporting HDR. It's mostly limited to flagship movies, series coming out, but it's still not as high of a percentage as it is, for example, at Netflix. The only thing I'll add to what's already been said is that so AOM has standardized how basically AV1 is carried in ISO-based media file format. So basically the CMAF bindings are defined. And part of that is also defining, how you signal HDR. So I think from a specification standpoint, I think we're good. I think it's really just about, do the devices out there that support AV1 decoding, can they carry the HDR metadata to the display? And so I think that's the part that's a little bit unknown, but I think, I would say it's not a complete mystery how to do HDR with AV1.
Yeah. I imagine you want to make sure the playback is, I mean, there's a big difference between knowing that it'll play well on a platform and it not being a mystery. So,
Yeah.
and that's pretty clear with Netflix stance is, AV1 is a 10-bit codec, so it obviously can carry, HDR information, but it's really the playback side that you feel least comfortable about. That's kind of what I would think anyway. So speaking about the playback side, I mean, I follow the VVC market, and you see, I mean, there's a lot of VVC stakeholders who also are big software publishers in China in particular. And, for the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of studies that show very good performance on mobile devices for VVC software playback. So, what are you hearing? Start with you, Alex. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? And when do you think VVC will become, you talked about AV1 being possible in the next 12 months. What are you thinking about VVC?
I think VVC is still several years away. I think as being a feasible option for content delivery, at least for like I said, premium content SVOD services. So I expect that before 2025, I don't think we're going to be really taking a serious look at VVC. Obviously, we're interested. It's a more efficient codec, so it's certainly interesting from that perspective. But yeah, I'm probably gonna wait another 2 years until we actually start taking a serious look at it.
Okay, Kevin, what are you seeing among your partner group?
Yeah, I see VVC as promising. It's more efficient without sacrificing qualities, which also comes with the cost of complexity and in terms of encoding and decoding. The adoption is going to be slow, I think, because it requires widespread from device manufacturers, software developers, and content providers. We were just talking about AV1, and if we look at AV1 development in the past, it was finalized in 2018, took about 2 or 3 years. Then the hardware OTT device start supporting that format. Then maybe another year for it to achieve a sizable market mass with AO media behind it. So it's difficult to predict when VVC will become widely adopted. But I definitely see several players in the industry, both hardware and software, from Asia Pac and Brazil, like MediaTek, Tencent, Alibaba, Allegro. They're already releasing their support for VVC. And I think Brazil TV 3.0 project is including that format as well.
That's right. Andrey, what do you think about VVC these days?
I agree. It seems like it's a bit too early to look into that, and we are currently basically, if I can say that internally, we are busy with rolling out AV1, in particular HDR. So that's what we are currently focused on.
Okay, Igor, anything to add?
Nothing to add. I mean, I think everything's been said. The only thing I would say, if I were to have my crystal ball, is I do think VVC adoption will go faster than AV1 has, but not by a lot. So Kevin, to your point, right, it's been 4-ish years, a little more than 4 years. Now we're seeing AV1 starting to be out there in the wild. I think maybe 3 years for VVC. I do think it'll go a little faster.
So Kevin, this is a question from the audience. You brought up the whole green codec idea. Which codecs do you think are the greenest, and what are you doing to kind of promote those inside of your partner group?
Yeah, that's kind of hard to say, because if you look at in terms of compression efficiency, and you could have very low rate distortions and very low bit rate. So in terms of transporting across the ingress across the CDN to the edge, if you call that green for lower bit rates, then that part of transporting of the codec is green. But meanwhile, you're spending a lot of encoding and CPU or GPU cycles to compress them. So it's a balance act. Recently, what we've been doing at AWS is looking at ARM-based encoding with Graviton, and we do see some rate deductions compared to just straight x86 CPU-based encoding. I can talk about that for many hours, and I see we're close on time, so I'll just leave at that. It depends on the trade-offs.
Okay. Does any of the panelists want to talk about LCEVC or EVC? Any experience with that, or any thoughts one way or the other about how and when those will become relevant?
Yeah, I would love to talk about LCEVC.
Go for it.
So yeah, I mean, I think LCEVC, in my opinion, could be the dark horse of the codec race. I think it has been sort of overlooked, I think, in recent years, but at the same time, I think it should be pointed out that it's a codec that I don't think it really necessarily competes with other codecs. I think its biggest strength is that it's an enhancement codec that works in tandem with other codecs, and so what that effectively means is that with LCEVC, you should always be able to, provide a quality boost to really any underlying codec, right? And so whatever the best of breed codecs are at the time, whether it's H.264 or HEVC or VVC, with LCEVC, because it functions as an enhancement layer, it could basically always be on top of, working on top of those codecs and providing that additional quality boost. So I think that's really, its biggest strength. And so I think, and it also provides backwards compatibility. So I think there's a lot of things about LCEVC that are quite attractive, really, for streaming in particular.
Okay, I mean, let's jump into that a little bit. I mean, the whole licensing structure is very publisher, I guess you'd call it ecosystem friendly, because if you at Warner decided to use it, you'd be the one paying the royalty, and it would be royalty free for all the encoding side and all the playback side. Is that, how much do licensing details like that factor into your decision to adopt or not adopt a codec?
Usually, in my case, it's usually the last thing I look at, because first, I always look at quality. Second, I look at device adoption, and make sure that, like I said, it makes sense from a financial perspective to even deploy the codec. And then licensing is the last step, really. So at that point, there's some math that needs to be done to also make sure that whatever cost savings might be coming from CDN delivery costs and such, that that's being offset, hopefully not too negatively, right, by the cost of licensing. But I understand why the LCEVC licensing terms are the way they are, right? They're kind of different from what we've been accustomed to with HEVC and other codecs, because they're clearly trying to incentivize adoption, because that's really the biggest step in trying to get it supported. And so I think it makes sense. But yeah, I wouldn't this early on in the process say we're not going to adopt LCEVC because of potential cost. I think that would be really the last step in the evaluation.
Okay, Igor, what's your sense of LCEVC and EVC and the whole licensing structure thing?
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of demand for it from customers, and so it's pretty low on our list of priorities. As a result, in our video developer report, when you look at EVC and LCEVC sort of deployments and plans to deploy, they're the lowest on the list, both for live and video on demand. So we tend to prioritize our work based on our customers and prospective customers' demand. For that reason, we haven't really pushed it up, but I think it is potentially a compelling licensing model if publishers like Warner Brothers Discovery or others do this sort of cost benefit analysis and decide, hey, it really makes sense for us to deploy this as an enhancement. Then I think that's a tool that we can go and start to develop. But until that happens, we're focused with our limited resources on some of the other codecs and improvements. I will say, Alex, to your point about quality improvements and also compression, right? There are other ways besides codecs to kind of achieve those gains. So I would say, you know, and in some cases, those are more practical, such as content aware encoding, right? You don't have to worry so much about end device compatibility in those cases. So, you know, we try to focus on, okay, what are the ways in which you can improve quality, or at least not lose in quality while achieving a really solid compression. And right now, the big use case for everyone is cost reduction, right? Cost reduction and optimization. And so we tend to, we've kind of shifted our focus to, you know, help our customers realize those practical use cases. Maybe in the future, LCEVC or EVC is gonna, you know, make it to that list, but for now it's pretty low on our list.
Okay, I want to tackle two more things before our hour is up. These are questions from the crowd. One is a question on AV2. And I know Andrey's spending a lot of his time planning and implementing that. Can you give us 30 seconds, Andrey, on what AV2 what it'll be like and when we might expect it?
So basically, the codec working group in the Alliance for Open Media is currently working on AV2. So we have the software available that's called AVM, and the latest, let's say the latest test, I think they were like over 17% gains over HEVC. No, over AV1, and we think that a couple of tools haven't been integrated yet. So our estimate was that we are probably will be about 19% soon. So we are basically hitting close to 20% over AV1 at the moment in the random access configuration. So a typical what you would use in broadcasting and streaming. So and we are working on improving it. So we are going to work further to have more gains over AV1, to have basically a substantial improvement in the compression efficiency. As for the timeline, I guess the timeline, it depends on us basically. As soon as we have substantial gains that we are happy with, then we will start writing the specification, and then it probably would be clear when the codec is going to be out.
Okay.
And yeah, so far it's, by the way, it's called AVM at this moment, not AV2, at least not yet.
Okay, one word answers now. Starting with you, Kevin. When do we see the first artificial intelligence-based codec?
I think it's quite some time away, but it's definitely something we're looking at.
Okay, Andrey, what are you thinking? One word, 2 words, month, year.
Well, I don't know. Basically, I think that the next generation, like for at least for AVM, is primarily like a traditional codec.
Okay, Igor.
Sorry,
Igor,
5+ years. That's my prediction.
Alex.
I'm going to be optimistic and say 2026.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Listen, panelists, it's a pleasure to see you all, and thank you for your participation and your insights and sharing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. That was a great discussion. As mentioned at the top of the hour, we will be giving away an Amazon gift card. I will give you 10 more seconds to enter the name of the song that was playing over the intro slides. I'm guessing nobody caught it because we didn't let you know ahead of time. That would be the case. We will be from here on out. Thanks again to Bitmovin for sponsoring this panel. Thanks to Signiant for sponsoring all of this week's sessions. And the Amazon gift card winner is, we'll just pick this name at random. It is Darkus Beasley. Darkus, you will get an email from us in the next week letting you know how to collect your Amazon gift card. Again, thanks, everyone. We'll be back in about 30 minutes with our next session, talking about overcoming edge and CDN infrastructure challenges. Until then, we'll see you.